Welcome back, friends. I'm Yvonne Davis, author, astrologer, and life transformation coach. And I have a new video for you today called Trump Loses Support. And this is actually something I've talked about in some of my other videos. It has to do with Saturn moving into Aquarius. So I'm going to bring up that chart for you. And in the meantime, I hope that you guys are managing stress levels. I know we're going through some challenging experiences right now, and many of you are choosing to self-isolate if you can, and hopefully doing everything you can to support your immune system. One of the most important things to do is to keep your stress levels low. So I hope that somehow this video will actually help with that. Now, we have to face the reality of what's happening, which is the spread of this novel CV, as I'm going to call it, and its impact. And I just want to say real quick, I'm putting links down below for all the videos I've found that I think are the most information and science based. Okay, these are people who know what they're talking about and are really giving us clear information, not just hyped up stories. We need facts, we need numbers, we need science, and in order to understand this. And one of the most fundamental things I want to say, as I point to Saturn moving into the 7th house and also moving into a square with Uranus, it's a wide square, but it's still a square. It still can have impact, especially with these long-term, slow-moving planets. The wide transits, the wide orbs, can still have tremendous impact over time. And I believe that this is related to stock market, finances, economics, and all of that. Because, astrologers have been saying for a long time, at least a year, that when Uranus moves into Taurus, which it's in now and has been for a year now, that this would have an impact on economics, the stock market, financial institutions, anything to do with money, finances, economics, the material well-being, and physicality, because that's what Taurus rules. Now, we also have Venus in here at the time, so that is providing some favorable support. And as I said before, that these readings are not to be taken as a personal reading. You need to look at how these land on your chart in particular, because if you have a lot of earth and water, then you're actually doing pretty well, because these planets are landing in a supportive way for you. So let's talk about what this means with Saturn moving into Aquarius. Now, this is Donald Trump's 7th house, and Saturn has the effect of contracting when it first moves into a new sign or a new house. It contracts things. And the reason why it does that is because it's trying to show us weaknesses, okay? It's trying to show us the weakest link. And by doing that, we are able to strengthen the fundamental, the foundation that our lives are built on, okay? And so this is really interesting to look at how this is happening in Donald Trump's chart, but also to think about the overriding transit of Saturn moving into Aquarius and also into a square with Uranus in Taurus. By the way, Uranus rules Aquarius, so that increases its impact. And yes, we are experiencing already this, the effects of this tightening, okay, that Saturn is going to do in its square to Uranus in Taurus. It is already impacting the stock market, is already impacting the financial institutions, economy, And I, you know, I have not gone to the store in a few days. I'm self-isolating as well. And I don't know, when I went to the store the last time, it looked like normal. There was nothing, absolutely nothing different, except that I had an experience where an older man walking in front of me, he hocked up a loogie and spit it onto the ground right in front of me. And I was pretty disgusted by that. And I looked down and it was all green and coagulated, you know. I was just like, oh my God, that is so disgusting. And people don't think about these things, you know, they feel uncomfortable. And so they just hawk it up and spit it out into the public domain. And we need to learn how to behave more responsibly. And I know all of you guys are behaving responsibly, but and we're all doing our best to behave responsibly and to take care of ourselves. But there are other people out there who are completely unconscious about this stuff. So anyway, I haven't been to the store since then. At some point, you know, obviously I will need to go to the grocery store and see what it looks like out there. But I've seen pictures and I've heard stories about shelves getting emptied, and you know, people are preparing for self-isolating and self-quarantine. And so next time I go to the store, I guess I'll find out if it's impacting us here in Grand Junction yet. So what does this do to Donald Trump? Well, Saturn moving into his 7th house. The 7th house rules long-term meaningful relationships. The 7th house is the house of others, okay? So in this 1st and 7th house axis, the 1st house is always self and the 7th house is others. It can be others in general. Usually to have a significant impact, it has to do with people who actually matter to you. And his electorate matters. You know, his base matters. And anyone else who's offering support, it matters. So he's got funders, you know, people in the media, the other people in politics and government. So there are a lot of sectors in which he requires support. And with Saturn moving into his 2nd house here, Saturn is at 0 degrees of Aquarius on March 21st. With it moving into his 7th house of others, it will tighten, it will contract, it will shrink, which means that he is losing support, okay? Because of the fact that there are fundamental weaknesses. And we all know what those weaknesses are, but I'm going to go ahead and point out a few that you might not have necessarily thought of, which is, it's kind of interesting, it's kind of ironic that the CV, it can't be intimidated by tweets. And that is the way that Trump functions. He thinks that tweeting and bullying and you know, his verbal abuse toward others, that's the way he manages his life, that's the way he manages other people. And the CV cannot, it doesn't, it has, you know, has no impact on that, absolutely none. You know, it can't be intimidated that way. So that's really interesting because that is his fundamental way of interacting with others. And in a sense, this can be considered another, okay? Not just an inanimate object, but it's like it has a life of its own. It is a living organism, and it cannot be intimidated in the way that he intimidates people. So that's really interesting to think about. Also, the stock market cannot be intimidated. You know, it just simply can't. You can't get on Twitter and intimidate and verbally abuse the stock market. It doesn't work. These, in a sense, they're inanimate objects, but they also have a life of their own. You know, the CV is a living organism. And the stock market, while it's not a living organism, it does have a spirit, and it does act to some degree as a living organism. So these two things will have a massive impact, and they cannot be intimidated. So that shows the fundamental weakness in the way he relates to others, that will also lead to a cascading loss of support for Donald Trump. And so I think that, you know, even though some other things I want to say about the CV is that if, you know, what I've learned from these videos that I've been watching and doing research is that it's natural in the course of life and human history on this planet to have these novel organisms coming up from time to time. They cycle through, and usually it's a 20-year cycle, because it has to do with generations, which usually come in 20-year cycles, and it has to do with whether or not the new generation has been exposed and has immunity. And so that's why this is a novel CV, because we don't yet have immunity. And so what happens is you either have to get a vaccine, and I am going to include a video. It's the third video. So look for below in the comments. I pinned it to the top, and it's the third video that talks about the timeline for vaccine. But those are the two ways to build immunity, are through the vaccine. So you can look at that video to see what the timeline is. The other way is through exposure. And therefore, if that is the way you gain immunity, that means that you have to have a strong immune system that can build up antibodies, and that's how it happens. Now, that's why this novel CV is so unusual, is because a lot of people, well, nobody has immunity to this one in particular, except those people who've already gotten sick and survived. Their bodies have built immunity, but some people may have partial immunity. So that's the whole issue, is that fundamentally, if that's the way you get exposed to it, is that you have to have a strong immune system, and you may even have partial immunity based on other of these that you've been exposed to over time. And but certain people who, you know, that's why they're always looking at age groups and people whose immune systems may be compromised. They're at the greatest risk, and it's severe risk. And besides that, nobody wants to take the chance. I mean, who would? And also, we need to consider that, you know, it is really, really painful. It is not a fun process to go through, and it is dangerous. So obviously, that's not our choice. That's not what we would choose to do. At least most of us. I think anti-vaxxers have a different viewpoint, but that's a whole other story that I'm not going to get into. And it's just interesting to think. I personally think it's really interesting to think about these different philosophical viewpoints and the consequences. The practical consequences, not just philosophical, theoretical consequences, but the actual consequences. And so that's what Donald Trump is going to be experiencing as Saturn moves into his 7th house. And like I said, I think it's already taking effect. These things they smear out over time. They don't just happen one day, although it will intensify when Saturn actually moves into Aquarius on March 21st. It will intensify. It will become more obvious, more noticeable, especially in the public sphere. So, and the other interesting thing about, I just said it will become more obvious in the public sphere. with the midheaven over his Mars. Mars rules his ninth house. And as I've said before, the ninth house rules politics. So we will see it having a political effect because the midheaven makes things public. You can see them in public view when the midheaven is activating a certain point in the chart. It's activating his natal Mars in his first house of self, which is the ruler of his ninth house of politics. So we will see it having a political effect, and Saturn will be contracting his support, reducing his support, limiting his support. So that's the effect of Saturn, is that he will lose support, and we will see it in the public realm. I'm sure that there will be many other places where it's not visible, but it will definitely be visible in the public political realm. And of course, the issue with the stock market and the economy and our relationship with China, which China also clearly cannot be intimidated. You know, Donald Trump has tried to intimidate them, and it's not going to work. We are, in a sense, to some degree, at their mercy, because if you've ever checked recently, if you go to, you know, major department stores like Target or Walmart, and you actually go down the shelves and you look at where things are made, I'm not talking about like produce, but any of the consumable products other than food, because food is obviously grown around the world and shipped to the United States. But other durable consumable products, if you go and you look to see where they're made, almost everything is made in China now. Almost nothing is made in the United States. And that's something else. That's another weakness that needs to be looked at, honestly, okay? Because Uranus is going to bring massive change. It's the disruptor. It's going to bring massive change in this sector. It's going to show us the weakness. And the tighter that Saturn gets into a square, because Saturn moves faster than Uranus, so it will eventually make an exact square to Uranus. That's when it's really going to be obvious. But all throughout this year, we're going to be seeing the effects. And that's why I keep saying, you know, I want you guys to protect yourselves, both your health and your financial assets. And so I personally do not have anything in the stock market. I tried it a couple times in the past, and I decided that it wasn't for me because it caused me way too much anxiety. You have to have a certain kind of attitude toward the stock market. That's what they always say. You have to have a very, very long-term attitude toward the stock market. And I couldn't do it. It was too much stress and anxiety for me. So, so after those two experiences, I made the decision I would never, ever, ever go back, and I won't. There are many, many other ways. I prefer a safe. I prefer to keep my capital, my principal safe. That's just my personal preference. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not telling you how to protect yourself. I'm just saying that's been my choice, and I'm saying why it's my choice. But you have to make your own choices. So that's pretty much all I can say here about Donald Trump, is the fact that that Saturn is causing him to lose support, and it will intensify when Saturn actually moves into Aquarius on March 21st. And it will stay there for a few months before it turns retrograde and returns to Capricorn. And then it will go into his seventh house again in late December. So, yeah, so I still don't have any black and white answers for you around the election. I am continuing to do research. I am constantly researching charts because there are many, many techniques that astrologers can use. And I have not reached a point yet where I'm comfortable making a prediction where that's concerned. But we will be having another interesting event that I'm going to make my next video about, called October Surprise, because we've got some really, really challenging alignments in October, but for individuals in terms of where it's landing on their chart. So again, I want to be really, really clear. Do not make assumptions about how this will impact you personally. Don't transpose this onto your chart and think that it's going to impact you personally, because we cannot know that without doing a personal reading. And so if you go into fear and worry about it, you may actually create a self-fulfilling prophecy that has absolutely nothing to do with what's happening in your chart. So please be very clear about that. Well, I think that's about all I can say about Trump right now. I guess I'll point out one more thing, which has been a long-term transit, which is the Neptune to his natal Sun North Node, Uranus conjunction, and his natal Moon South Node conjunction. And of course, this is all about self-delusion, deceit, deception, missing information, even mental illness. The square is his utter inability to wake up to reality. But I think that what is happening now could actually finally crack through this defense mechanism that he has around self-delusion. I don't know for a fact. I'm just saying it might, because this illness and the stock market will not respond to his typical interactions, his fundamental interactions with others. It will not respond to that, and he will have to face the weakness in the way that he responds to reality. Okay, so I'm going to leave it at that for now. And as always, if you have not yet subscribed, please subscribe to my channel, ring the bell for notifications, share with friends and family and on social media, and leave your comments. And if you need a reading, you can click on the link below. Also, check out the 3 videos that I'm pinning to the top of the comments, because again, I've been doing tons of research, and these are the 3 best I've found for accurate, really potent information. And if you have ordered a reading and either for some reason haven't received an email receipt or need to set an appointment, please contact me at admin@yvonnedavis.com. And if even that doesn't work, because the problem is every once in a while an email will go into spam, and I have if I don't hear from someone, I have no idea if they received an email from me. So if all else fails, please contact me through YouTube. Okay, you can leave a message or whatever. I'm always reading the comments, so if you leave a comment for me, at least we know that will work. Okay, so so feel free to do that, because I definitely want you to be able to get your appointment. All right, so that's it for today, and I will talk to you again next time. Take care. Bye-bye.